The scent of truffle oil and aged wine filled Delacroix, the upscale restaurant nestled in the city's most exclusive district. Linda Gaston pushed through the heavy glass doors, her daughter's small hand clutched tightly in hers, both of them underdressed for the elegant space around them. Before we begin, thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this. The dinner rush was in full swing, and every linen-covered table gleamed with crystal stemware and faces that belonged to a world Linda had only observed from the outside. Before we begin, thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this. At 31, Linda stood out in her faded denim jacket and worn sneakers, a stark contrast to the silk dresses and tailored suits surrounding her. Her daughter, Emma, tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, you said somewhere fancy." "Just this once, baby," Linda whispered, checking the modest bills in her wallet. "Just this once for your birthday." After 2 years of juggling night shifts at the diner and weekend cleaning jobs, this dinner, however modest, was her attempt to give Emma something special. Something that felt like more than survival. Rain began to streak the floor-to-ceiling windows as Linda scanned the restaurant for any available table. The hostess had told her the wait would be 45 minutes, maybe longer. Her gaze landed on a corner table where a man sat alone, the empty chair across from him her only hope of sitting down before Emma's feet gave out. With Emma's hand in hers and her pride barely held together, she approached cautiously. "Excuse me." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Is this seat taken?" The man looked up and Linda's breath caught. Even seated, his presence commanded the room. Dark eyes assessed her with unnerving precision, his expression unreadable beneath the amber glow of the table's candlelight. His suit probably cost more than her monthly rent. The watch on his wrist caught the light. Subtle, expensive, dangerous. For a moment he said nothing. Just studied her with the kind of attention that felt like being seen through, not simply seen. Linda felt her daughter press closer against her leg. Then his gaze shifted to Emma, lingered for a fraction of a second and returned to Linda. "Only if you eat too," he said quietly. His voice was smooth, controlled, carrying an authority that made the conditional offer sound less like kindness and more like a command. The moment froze. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was conditional, and somehow more invasive than either. Linda felt exposed, her exhaustion and desperation laid bare by a stranger who seemed to see more than he should. Around them, the restaurant continued its elegant rhythm. Servers gliding past with silver trays, the soft clink of silverware, muted conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. But at this table, the world had narrowed to a single impossible choice. As she hesitated, Stanleyus Lavallee, though she didn't know his name yet, reached across the table and pushed an untouched plate of pasta closer to her side. The gesture was deliberate, slow, absolutely commanding. Not a suggestion. An expectation. Emma's stomach growled audibly. Linda's pride screamed at her to walk away. But her daughter's hunger was louder. "Thank you," she heard herself say, the words tasting like surrender. As Linda lowered herself into the chair, pulling Emma onto her lap, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just accepted something far more binding than a meal. The man across from her leaned back slightly, satisfaction flickering across his features so quickly she almost missed it. The audience senses immediately, this man is not ordinary, this offer is not simple, and accepting it may cost more than refusing ever could. What Linda didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Stanleyus Lavallee never did anything without calculation. And the moment she sat down, she became something he'd decided to keep. Linda didn't sit down anymore. Not really. Even now, in the restaurant chair that probably cost more than her security deposit, she perched on the edge like she might need to run. Emma settled into her lap, small fingers reaching tentatively toward the pasta Stanley had offered. Linda caught her daughter's hand gently. "We'll order something," Linda said, her voice quiet but firm. Stanley's dark eyes didn't leave her face. "That dish is untouched. Perfectly good food going to waste while a child goes hungry." He paused. "Pride is expensive, Emma." "Gaston. Linda Gaston." She shouldn't have given her name. Shouldn't have sat down in the first place. But Emma's weight against her chest made decisions for her. "Linda." He said it like he was testing the shape of it. I'm Stanley. No last name offered. No explanation for why he sat alone at a table meant for four, why the staff gave him such careful distance, why his presence seemed to bend the air around him. Emma's stomach growled again and Linda felt something inside her crack. She pulled the plate closer, breaking off a small piece of pasta for her daughter. The surrender tasted like ash, but Emma's delighted smile made it almost bearable. Thank you, Linda whispered. You work nights. It wasn't a question. Stanley leaned back, his attention absolute. 2 jobs, maybe 3. Daughter's 7, maybe 8. Father's not in the picture. Linda's blood ran cold. How do you? Your hands? He gestured with his wine glass. Chemical burns on the knuckles. Industrial cleaner. Calluses from repetitive work. The exhaustion isn't just physical, it's the kind that comes from never stopping. His gaze shifted to Emma. And she's learned not to ask for things. Children that age should still believe the world will give them what they need. The accuracy was terrifying. Linda gathered Emma closer, prepared to stand. I'm not here to hurt you, Stanley said, his voice dropping lower. Quite the opposite. I don't need. Everyone needs something, Linda. He set down his glass with precise care. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it. A waiter appeared as if summoned, setting down a children's menu and fresh water for Emma. Linda hadn't seen Stanley signal anyone. The staff simply knew. Order whatever she wants, Stanley continued. Whatever you want. It's already handled. I can pay for my own. I know you can. Something flickered in his expression. Not pity, but something more dangerous. Recognition. Respect for a fight he knew she'd lose. But tonight you won't. Linda should have left. Should have gathered her daughter and walked away from this strange, commanding man who saw too much and offered too freely. Instead she stayed. Because Emma was finally smiling. Because the weight of 2 years of struggling alone had become unbearable. Because sometimes surrender felt like the only choice left. And Stanley LaValle watched her choose, satisfaction settling into his shoulders like a man who just won the opening move of a much longer game. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Stanley LaValle had built an empire on observation. He noticed the way Linda's left hand trembled slightly when she lifted her water glass. Fatigue, not fear. Noticed how Emma unconsciously leaned into her mother's body, seeking warmth and safety in a space that felt too big, too expensive, too exposed. Noticed the exact moment Linda's pride warred with her hunger, the way her jaw clenched before she finally took a bite of the meal he'd offered. Most people thought power came from money or violence. Stanley knew better. Power came from seeing what others missed. How old is she? He asked, nodding toward Emma. 8. Linda's answer was cautious, protective. Her birthday. Today. Stanley felt something unexpected shift in his chest. A birthday dinner at a restaurant where they couldn't afford the appetizers. Where the mother wore exhaustion like a second skin and the child had learned not to hope too loudly. Then she should have dessert, he said simply. We're fine. I wasn't asking your permission. His tone remained calm, but the authority beneath it was unmistakable. He gestured and the same waiter appeared instantly. Bring the birthday selection. All of it. Linda's eyes widened. That's not necessary. It's her birthday. Stanley met her gaze steadily. When did you last celebrate yours? The question landed like a physical blow. Linda looked away, her hand tightening around Emma's small shoulder. The answer was written in her silence. She didn't remember. Birthdays were luxuries for people who had time to mark the passage of years instead of simply surviving them. Stanley had spent 15 years building the LaValle organization from his father's brutal foundation into something more sophisticated, more untouchable. He controlled shipping routes, real estate, half the city's political infrastructure. He'd learned to read people the way others read balance sheets, assets, liabilities, breaking points. But something about this woman unsettled his calculations. She should have been easy to categorize. Desperate, vulnerable, in need of rescue. Instead, she sat across from him with her spine straight despite the exhaustion, feeding her daughter before herself. refusing to make eye contact too long because she understood instinctively that prolonged attention from a man like him was dangerous. Smart. Guarded. Proud beyond reason. Stanley found himself intrigued. "I own this restaurant," he said quietly. "Along with most of the block. The apartment building 3 streets over. The medical clinic on 5th. He paused, letting the information settle. "I notice things, Linda. And I've noticed you." Her head snapped up, fear finally breaking through the careful composure. "Why?" "Because you're still fighting." He leaned forward slightly. "Most people in your position would have asked me for help by now. You're asking me to leave you alone. I don't need charity?" Stanley's smile was cold, knowing. "No. But you need something. And eventually you'll accept it." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. "Enjoy your dinner. The bill's handled. So is next month's rent." "What?" "No, I can't." "You already did." He placed a business card on the table, heavy stock, minimal text. "Just a name and number. When you're ready to stop pretending you can do this alone, call me." Stanley walked away, leaving Linda holding the card like it might burn her. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He already knew she'd call. Linda stared at the business card for 3 days before she threw it away. Then she dug it out of the trash at 2 in the morning when the eviction notice arrived. The card was simple, black with silver lettering. Stanley S. LaValle. A phone number. Nothing else. No company name, no title, no explanation for why a man who owned half the city had paid attention to a single mother eating borrowed pasta. She didn't call. Not that night, or the next morning, or the day after when she discovered her rent had indeed been paid. The landlord had been confused, then careful. The kind of careful that came from recognizing a name he didn't want to cross. "Mr. LaValle handles it now," he'd said, avoiding her eyes. "Don't worry about February either." Linda had felt her world tilt. 2 months of rent. Just handled. Like it was nothing. She'd wanted to refuse it, to march down to wherever Stanley LaValle conducted business and throw the money back in his face. But Emma needed new shoes. The heating bill was overdue. Pride couldn't keep them warm or fed. So Linda did what she always did, she worked. Double shifts at the diner, weekend cleaning jobs, anything to build a buffer between herself and the debt she didn't ask for but couldn't refuse. On the 4th night, she found an envelope taped to her apartment door. Inside was a restaurant gift card to Delacroix and a handwritten note in precise, masculine script. Emma mentioned she liked the chocolate cake. Bring her back. Linda's hands shook as she read it. He'd been listening. Not just to her but to her daughter. To an 8-year-old's casual comment about dessert. The attention felt like surveillance. She threw the card away. Then retrieved it an hour later when Emma asked if they could go back to the fancy place with the nice man. "He wasn't nice, baby," Linda said automatically. "He gave me cake." Emma's logic was simple, unburdened by adult suspicion. Nice people give you cake on your birthday. Linda couldn't argue with that. Couldn't explain that gifts from men like Stanley LaValle came with invisible strings, with expectations that wouldn't reveal themselves until you were already tangled. But Emma was 8. And she'd smiled more at that dinner than she had in months. So Linda found herself back at Delacroix on a Saturday evening, gift card clutched in her hand like evidence of her own weakness. The hostess recognized her immediately, another thing that shouldn't have been possible, another sign of how thoroughly Stanley's attention had marked her. "Mr. LaValle is expecting you," the woman said smoothly. "I didn't tell him I was coming." The hostess smiled with practiced discretion. "He knows." Of course he did. Linda was led to the same corner table. Stanley sat exactly as he had before, perfectly composed, expensive suit, dark eyes that tracked her approach with unsettling precision. "You came," he said simply. "For Emma." Linda's voice was firm. "Not for you." "I know." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "That's why you're here." And Linda realized, sinking into the seat, that he'd been counting on exactly that, her love for her daughter outweighing her pride. She'd walked into his trap with her eyes open, and he'd let her see every step of it. Linda learned the truth about Stanley S. LaValle the way most people learn dangerous things, by accident, and too late to undo what she'd already accepted. It started with a conversation at the diner. "Table 4's asking for you," Marcus said, jerking his thumb toward the corner booth. Her coworker's face was pale, his usual easy smile replaced by something that looked like fear. "And Linda? Be careful what you say." She turned to see two men in dark suits, their attention fixed on her with the kind of professional assessment that made her skin crawl. "Not cops. Something else. Miss Gaston." The older one stood as she approached, his courtesy feeling more like a threat. "We work for Mr. Lavalley. He wanted to ensure you received this." He placed an envelope on the table. Thick, expensive paper. Inside, she knew without opening it, would be money she hadn't asked for. "I don't want." He also wanted us to mention that your daughter's school has some structural issues. Fire code violations actually. He's arranged for repairs. The principal was very grateful. Linda's blood turned to ice. "He's been to Emma's school?" "Mr. Lavalley takes interest in the well-being of those under his protection." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's what he does." They left before she could refuse the envelope. Before she could process the word that kept echoing in her mind. Protection. That night, Linda did what she should have done weeks ago. She searched Stanley's name online. The results made her stomach drop. Stanley S. Lavalley. Heir to the Lavalley shipping empire. Suspected, though never proven, connections to organized crime. Money laundering investigations that mysteriously stalled. Business partners who disappeared from public records. A federal prosecutor who died in a car accident 3 years ago, right before a major indictment. The articles were careful, legally precise. But between the lines, the truth was clear. Stanley Lavalley wasn't just wealthy. He was untouchable. Dangerous. Connected to a world where debts were paid in ways that had nothing to do with money. And she'd let him pay her rent. Let him into her daughter's life. Let herself sit across from him twice, eating meals she couldn't afford, accepting help that now felt like a noose tightening slowly around her neck. Her phone rang at midnight. A known number. She knew who it was before she answered. "You've been researching me." Stanley's voice was calm, almost amused. "Good. I prefer informed decisions. Stay away from my daughter. I'm ensuring her safety, Linda. Her school needed repairs. Her mother needed financial stability. I provided both. I didn't ask for your protection." "No." A pause, weighted with meaning. "But you accepted it. Which means you're already mine." The words hung in the darkness of her apartment, possessive, absolute, terrifying in their certainty. "I'll return everything," Linda said, her voice shaking. "The rent, the meals, all of it." "You can't." His tone remained gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Because it was never about money, Linda. It was about seeing if you'd choose your daughter's well-being over your pride. This isn't choice. It's manipulation. It's both." Stanley's honesty was more frightening than any lie. "And now we move forward. Together. Because the alternative, walking away from what I offer, means watching Emma suffer. And we both know you won't do that." Linda hung up, hands trembling. He was right. God help her, he was right. The help kept coming, relentless and unwanted. Linda's car, a 15-year-old sedan held together by prayer and duct tape, broke down on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, a mechanic she'd never called appeared at her apartment with the keys and a repair bill marked "paid in full." "Compliments of Mr. Lavalley," the mechanic said, tipping his hat. She wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him to take the car back, that she'd walk before accepting another thing from Stanley. But Emma needed to get to school, and Linda needed to get to work, and pride couldn't bridge the 3 miles between them and survival. So she took the keys. On Thursday, her manager at the diner pulled her aside. "Got a call from some corporate investor. Says he's bought the building, wants to upgrade staff compensation." His expression was bewildered. "You're getting a raise, Linda. A big one." No explanation, just, effective immediately. Linda's hands clenched around her order pad. "Who bought the building?" Her manager shrugged. "Some holding company. Lavalley Properties, I think." "Of course. Friday brought a letter from Emma's school. Her daughter had been selected for a scholarship program. Full tuition coverage for their after-school care, plus tutoring services. The program director had very specifically requested Emma by name. Linda crumpled the letter in her fist, fury and helplessness warring in her chest. She called the number on Stanley's card. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting. "Stop," Linda said without preamble. "Whatever you're doing, the car, my job, Emma's school, stop." "Why?" His voice was genuinely curious. "Your life is improving. Your daughter has opportunities she didn't have before. You're sleeping more than 4 hours a night for the first time in years. Because it's not real." Her voice cracked. "None of this is mine. It's yours. You're just letting me borrow it. Isn't that what help is?" Stanley's tone remained calm, reasonable. Someone with resources sharing them with someone who needs them? Help is something you can walk away from. This is, she searched for the word. This is ownership. Perhaps. Pause. Or perhaps it's just a man with considerable means ensuring that a woman he admires doesn't have to choose between feeding her child and paying rent. "You don't admire me. You're collecting me. I can do both." The honesty in his voice was devastating. "Meet me tomorrow, Linda. Delacroix noon. We'll discuss terms." "There are no terms. I want out." "There's always out," Stanley said quietly. "I'll withdraw every bit of support. Your raise disappears. The scholarship ends. The car goes back. Your rent returns to what it was." He let that sink in. "And you go back to working yourself to death while Emma learns that the world has nothing good to offer her. Is that what you want?" Linda's throat closed. "That's not fair." "No," Stanley agreed. "But it's honest. Tomorrow noon. I'll be waiting." He hung up before she could refuse. Linda stood in her apartment. The one with rent she could suddenly afford, with heat that worked, with a daughter sleeping soundly in the next room, and realized she was already caught. The trap had closed so gradually she hadn't felt the teeth until now. And Stanley LaValle had known exactly how tight to make it. Linda went to Delacroix at noon because not going felt like letting him win. She told herself it was about confrontation, about drawing boundaries. But as she walked through those glass doors in her diner uniform, no time to change between shifts, she knew the truth. She was there because he'd left her no real choice. Stanley sat at their table. Their table. As if 3 meetings had established ownership of space, of routine, of her. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "Always the courtesy, always the control wrapped in civility. To tell you this ends now." Linda remained standing, refusing the chair he gestured toward. "Whatever you think this is." "Sit down, Linda. I don't take orders from." "Sit." His voice didn't rise, but the command in it was absolute. "Please." The please was worse than the order. It gave her the illusion of choice while making clear that refusal would have consequences. She sat. Stanley slid a folder across the table. "Your debt summary. Everything I've provided, itemized. Current market value." Linda's hands trembled as she opened it. The numbers made her dizzy. The rent, the car repairs, the raise that came from buying her workplace, Emma's scholarship. It totaled more than she'd make in 3 years. "I can't pay this back." "I know." Stanley leaned back, his dark eyes steady on hers. "That's not what I'm asking." "Then what do you want?" "Dinner. Once a week. Here." He gestured around the restaurant. "You, me, sometimes Emma. Conversation. Nothing more." Linda laughed, the sound bitter. "That's it? Dinner in exchange for financial security? In exchange for stopping the pretense that you don't need help?" His expression softened slightly. "I'm not your enemy, Linda. I'm someone with resources who chooses to use them for you." "Why?" The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. "Why me? Why Emma? There are thousands of struggling families in this city. I don't care about thousands of families." Stanley's honesty was brutal. "I care about you." The words landed like a physical touch. Linda felt her breath catch, her carefully constructed walls threatening to crumble. "You don't even know me. I know you work 2 jobs and still go hungry so Emma can eat." I know you haven't bought yourself new clothes in 18 months. I know you cried in your car last week after the mechanic quoted you $1,200 you didn't have. He paused. I know because I pay attention. And what I see is someone who deserves not to fight alone. I'm not yours to save. No, Stanley agreed. But you are someone I choose to protect. There's a difference. Linda stared at the folder, at the impossible numbers, at the man who'd quietly dismantled every barrier she'd built around her independence. Pride said walk away. Refuse. Protect what little autonomy remained. But survival, and Emma's future, said something else entirely. One dinner a week, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. That's all. Stanley's smile was small, knowing. For now. And Linda realized she'd just negotiated the terms of her own surrender. The dinners became routine. Every Thursday at 7 Linda and Emma would arrive at Delacroix. Stanley would be waiting, already seated, a small gift for Emma. A book, a puzzle, nothing extravagant enough to feel like bribery but thoughtful enough to make Linda's daughter light up. After 3 weeks, Linda almost forgot to feel trapped. Almost. Then Stanley invited them to his home. Just dinner, he said during their Thursday meal. My chef is exceptional. Emma would enjoy the gardens. We're fine here, Linda said immediately. Linda. His tone was patient, almost indulgent. I'm not asking you to move in. Just to see where I live. To let Emma play somewhere besides your apartment complex parking lot. The mention of Emma's limited world stung because it was true. Their apartment had no yard, no safe place to run. Emma spent her days inside or at school, her world as constrained as Linda's budget. This weekend, Stanley continued. Saturday afternoon. I'll send a car. No. The word came out harder than Linda intended. No car. No home visits. The restaurant is fine. Something flickered across Stanley's face, surprise, maybe annoyance. Why? Because this, Linda gestured between them, has boundaries. Public spaces. Limited time. The moment I walk into your home, those boundaries disappear. You're being paranoid. I'm being smart. Linda leaned forward, her voice low so Emma wouldn't hear. You've controlled everything else. My job, my rent, my daughter's education. My home is mine. The line is here. Stanley studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. The restaurant it is. Linda should have felt relieved. Instead she felt uneasy. Stanley LaValle didn't concede easily, which meant this wasn't really a concession. She was right. On Saturday morning there was a knock at her door. Linda opened it to find a delivery crew unloading boxes. Wrong apartment, she said. 402B, right? The man checked his clipboard. Furniture delivery for Gaston. I didn't order furniture. Mr. LaValle did. Kids' bedroom set, study desk, bookshelf. Sign here. Linda's vision tunneled. Take it back. Ma'am, it's already paid for. I don't care. Take it back. But Emma had appeared behind her, eyes wide at the sight of the beautiful white desk visible through the doorway. Mommy, is that for me? The delivery man looked between them, uncomfortable. Look, lady, I'm just doing my job. Leave it outside, Linda said sharply. I'll deal with it. She slammed the door, grabbed her phone, and called Stanley. You crossed the line, she said when he answered. I sent furniture to make Emma's life better. You invaded my home. Her voice shook with fury. I told you no. I set a boundary and you bulldozed right through it. Linda, if you ever send anything to my apartment again without asking, we're done. No more dinners. No more help. I'll figure it out on my own. The silence stretched long enough that Linda thought he might have hung up. Then, you're right. I apologize. The admission shocked her into silence. I overstepped, Stanley continued quietly. It won't happen again. Promise me. I promise. Pause. But Linda? The furniture stays. Emma deserves a place to do homework. Let her have that at least. Linda looked at her daughter's hopeful face pressed against the window, watching the delivery crew. Fine, she whispered. But this is the last time. Stanley's response was soft, almost sad. We both know that's not true. Stanley S. LaValle lost control in the parking lot of Linda's apartment building on a Tuesday night. He'd been sitting in his car for 20 minutes, watching her third-floor window, when he saw the man approach her door. Tall, unsteady on his feet, aggressive body language even from a distance. Linda's ex-husband, Stanley, had done his research, a man with a restraining order and a drinking problem. Stanley was out of the car before conscious thought caught up. He took the stairs 3 at a time, arriving just as raised voices echoed through the thin walls. "You can't keep her from me." The man's shout was slurred, furious. "She's my daughter too. You haven't paid child support in 2 years. You have no rights." The sound of something breaking. Emma screamed. Stanley didn't knock. He put his shoulder into the door, the cheap lock splintering easily under his weight. The scene inside made his vision narrow to a single point. Linda backed against the wall, Emma behind her, a man twice Linda's size with his hand raised. "Get out," Stanley said quietly. The ex-husband turned, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. "Who the hell are you?" "The person giving you 5 seconds to leave. This is between me and my family." Stanley moved. Years of calculated control dissolved into pure violence. He had the man against the wall in 2 strides, forearm pressed against his throat with precisely calibrated pressure. Not enough to kill, but enough to make breathing difficult. "You don't have a family here anymore," Stanley said, his voice cold and dead calm. "You have a woman who's rebuilt her life without you and a daughter who flinches when you raise your voice. Those aren't yours to touch. You're choking." "I'm demonstrating consequence." Stanley leaned closer. "If you come back, if you call, if you text, if you so much as drive down the street, I will find you. And what I do won't be fast." He released the man who crumpled, gasping. Stanley grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to the broken door. "Go. Now." The ex-husband fled, stumbling down the stairs. Stanley turned to find Linda staring at him, Emma pressed against her mother's side. The apartment was suddenly too quiet, broken glass glittering on the floor, the violence still hanging in the air like smoke. "Are you hurt?" Stanley's voice was rough, unsteady in a way it never was. Linda shook her head slowly. "You broke down my door. I'll have it replaced within the hour. You could have killed him." "I could have." Stanley's hands were still shaking, with rage, with fear he didn't know how to process. "But I didn't. Because you're in control." Linda's voice was strange, something between gratitude and terror. "You're always in control." "No." Stanley looked at her, at Emma, at the evidence of how close he'd come to crossing a line he couldn't uncross. "Not with you. Never with you." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Stanley LaValle, who controlled half the city, who never acted without calculation, had just shattered his own carefully maintained facade because someone had threatened what he'd claimed as his. Linda saw it, the truth beneath his composed exterior. The possessiveness. The violence. The absolute certainty that she and Emma belonged to him now, whether she'd agreed or not. "You need to leave," she whispered. Stanley nodded slowly. "I'll send someone to fix the door. And security. He won't come back." "Stanley." "I know." He moved toward the broken door, then paused. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "Which part?" Linda's voice cracked. "The violence or the fact that you're exactly who I feared you were?" Stanley met her eyes one last time. "Both." Then he left, leaving Linda to realize that the man who'd saved her was also the one she should run from. And she had nowhere left to run. Linda didn't see Stanley for a week after the incident. Her door was repaired within hours, reinforced steel replacing the cheap wood. Security cameras appeared in the hallway. A private security guard took up residence in the building lobby, polite, professional, unmistakably armed. Her ex-husband didn't return. According to a terse text from an unknown number, he'd left the state. Permanently. Linda should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of Stanley's protection like chains made of kindness. On the 8th day, she went to Delacroix without being summoned. Stanley was there as she knew he would be. He looked different, tired, the careful composure frayed at the edges. He stood when she approached, uncertainty flickering across his features. "Linda, sit down." She used his own tone on him, command wrapped in courtesy. "Please." They sat in silence for a long moment. The restaurant hummed around them, oblivious to the reckoning happening at their corner table. "I know what you are," Linda said finally. "Not just wealthy. Not just connected. You're dangerous. The kind of man who can make people disappear with a phone call." Stanley didn't deny it. "And I know why you want me." She met his eyes steadily. "Because I'm not like the people in your world. Because I don't want your power or your money. Because I looked at you and saw just a man." "Yes. But that's not who you are." Linda's voice was quiet but firm. "You're Stanley LaValle. And being with you means accepting that violence and control come with the protection. I would never hurt you or Emma." "I know." And she did. That was the terrifying part. "But you'd hurt for us. You'd destroy anyone who threatened us. You already have." Stanley's jaw tightened. He deserved worse than he got. "Maybe." Linda pulled an envelope from her purse, the debt summary he'd given her weeks ago. "I can't pay this back. Not in my lifetime. So you win. I'm yours financially. Completely." "Linda." "But Emma isn't." She slid a second document across the table. "Legal paperwork hastily prepared. Full custody stays with me. No interference from you or anyone you send. Her education, her life choices, her future. Mine to decide. Not yours." Stanley stared at the document. "You're setting terms. I'm drawing the line you can't cross." Linda's hands trembled but her voice stayed steady. "You can have me. My time, my company, my whatever this becomes. But my daughter stays mine. And if I refuse, then I disappear. I'll take Emma and go somewhere your money and your power can't follow." Linda held his gaze. "I'll spend the rest of my life running if I have to." The threat hung between them. They both knew she meant it, and that Stanley could stop her. Could track her anywhere, keep her caged with kindness until she had nothing left but surrender. But he wouldn't. Because the woman he wanted was the one brave enough to negotiate terms with a man who never negotiated. Stanley picked up a pen and signed the document without reading it. "She's yours," he said quietly. "Completely. I promise." "And me?" Stanley's smile was small, honest, edged with something that might have been relief. "You're mine. But only because you're choosing to be." Linda felt something shift, the balance finally evening out between them. Not equal, perhaps, but honest. "One more thing," she said. "Anything. Next Thursday you come to my apartment. No car, no driver. Just you. You want to be part of my life? Then you exist in my world too." Stanley laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. "Deal." Linda stood and Stanley rose with her. As she turned to leave, his hand caught hers gently. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not running." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "For staying." Linda looked at their joined hands, hers marked with work and struggle, his bearing a signet ring that probably cost more than her car. Proof of the impossible distance between them. And proof that sometimes distance could be crossed. "Don't make me regret it," she whispered. Stanley lifted her hand to his lips, the gesture courtly and possessive all at once. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you don't." As Linda walked out of Delacroix, she realized she'd done the impossible. She'd negotiated terms with a man who controlled everything and kept the one thing that mattered most. Her choice. Her daughter. Her dignity. Stanley LaValle had won her. But she'd won too. And maybe, in the end, that was what love looked like when power finally learned to bend. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.